Hey everyone, it's me HawkeyeG here, and today I'm bringing you a new unit spotlight video. It's where I take a look at a specific unit from a specific roster and go in depth on what makes them special. Today's unit is focusing on the standard Irondrake unit from the Dwarf roster. This means that I'll be talking about the unit's strengths, weaknesses, its purpose in your army, the best and worst situations for it, and ultimately whether I think it's worthwhile for you to bring them or not. So with that being said, let's get into the details and talk about what makes this unit great. So taking a look at their stat card here, we can see some of their strengths and weaknesses pretty easily. They have really big damage, and of course because it's going to be fire damage, it's also going to damage their leadership. We can kind of see that here, but it also shows that it gives you a little bit of explosive damage, 4 shots per volley, 147 missile strength. Now, it's not purely armor piercing, but it does still have a lot of that explosive damage, and so it's going to do a lot of damage. It's going to be really great crowd control, damage against infantry. They've also got really high armor value. 125 is absolutely nothing to scoff at. And for this being a unit that's relatively early accessible, that's pretty good. It should mean that they're resistant to a lot of attacks from a lot of different types of units. I have here in my notes really big damage. Even this number seems to be underwhelming to me compared to the amount of damage that they can output, and we'll see a couple demonstrations of that later. And of course, there's two important things with the high damage and the fire damage. Okay, yes, fire damage affects leadership. I did already mention that, but it's important to note that the leadership debuff from being burnt plus the burst damage that they're capable of, these effects are all going to stack up, so they're actually very effective at depleting enemy leadership really quickly. It's one of their greatest strengths, and so you're going to be able to rout units very quickly in addition to doing a lot of damage to them all at once. Now, what are some of their weaknesses? They have a very low model count. Okay, I'm playing on large unit scale right now, and they have 21 units in their army compared to 75 for Dwarf Warriors, 60 for Quarrelers. 21 is very little. That means a lot of their value, depends on keeping them very much alive. Of course, with 125 armor, it's relatively easy to do, but they're not survivable in melee, and if they take too much damage, basically they're going to die really, really quickly. They also have a very low range, a range of 80. The Quarrelers have double that range. If we zoom out a little bit, I don't have them quite side by side, but you can see with a 10-second reload time, an Irondrake is going to get 1, maybe 2 shots off at any unit that's directly approaching it before they actually get into melee combat with it. So that's a pretty big weakness. It's got great damage, but that 80 range is pretty limiting. And of course, it's not something that we can really see in the stats, but just because of the things that we've talked about here, there's a very high attention requirement and micro requirement. Of course, with high damage and flames brings lots of friendly fire. So if you're not positioning them well and you're not getting good targeted fire onto enemy units, you leave them on fire at will and you kind of forget about them. They're shooting your units in the back. You have a hard time setting up a formation, or you're trying to micromanage your cavalry and your gyro bombers and your Irondrakes. It's really, or you just stop paying attention to them and they get shot by archers too many times, or they get hit by a cavalry charge. It's really easy to lose track of these units for a short period of time and have it actually be a pretty costly offense. Now, as far as their purpose goes, they are, of course, an elite infantry destroyer. Even armored targets are going to take a lot of damage, and like I said, the burst damage will cause enemies to rout. They're still very good chaff blaster. Even up against Skaven, the Skaven have low armor, but very high models and unit count, right? So being able to just eliminate those numbers and turn the tide in your favor very quickly, they're very effective at that. And if used correctly, it can deal with multiple enemy units. They also pair extremely well with heroes. In particular, the Dwarf Thane hero has a specific upgrade that locks out 2 other upgrades that gives them flame damage resistance. Not that they really need it because Irondrakes aren't good against single targets, but it just kind of adds on to that bonus of, you get a Thane to get enemies to pile up, and then you just lambast them with Irondrakes. So I've got a little siege battle running here, and we're mostly going to try to focus on what the Irondrakes are doing when we get to that. It's on fast forward right now, so we can get to see some of that. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what makes them good, like their best and worst use cases, like I had mentioned before. Some of their best cases are up against melee infantry heavy or cavalry heavy factions with little to no armor piercing missiles, right? So Greenskins and the Skaven, great targets for your Irondrakes. The Skaven is, like I said, having high model counts and very low armor. Really a perfect target for these Irondrakes, especially with their leadership, their easy ability to rout. You'll see that we'll kind of get the Skaven. You see this whole Skaven here in this aisle. If my Irondrake was already in there, it'd be able to probably repel all three of these groups all at once. We're going to see, though, it's going to be able to get some shots right through here and do some pretty significant damage, so we'll try to get a good angle on that. So being able to bring it against factions, like I said, the Skaven, the Greenskins, any factions that are going to have a lot of infantry, especially melee infantry, even some cavalry. We can see some of the first shots getting in, and even some bad shots are going to do good damage. Yeah, they're shooting at the Lord. But going up against, Skaven don't have really good armor-piercing missiles. They do, of course, have artillery, and I suppose if they are bringing rattling guns or warp-lock Jezzails, you might want to be careful. But you can see a single volley right onto these Skaven slaves pretty much took them out. So if you get one of these units in the early game, super effective unit. Now, like I said, they can also be really good with a Thane hero or even your Lord, really any kind of hero or single entity that they can just kind of be able to shoot around is going to be really effective for them. The Thane hero with that buff, of course, is going to give them another advantage. But even if I can get these Dwarf warriors off to the side and sort of get the Irondrakes to either shoot straight through as enemies approach or get them lined up on the side, that's going to work great. And here you can see they're all starting to pile into this entrance. We got units on either side so that they'll kind of line up in the middle here, and we're just going to be able to, even getting shots onto that Lord, some of the fire is going to leak through. Hopefully that makes the point. We'll show a little bit of the alleyway fire a little later. They're also quite good in siege battles, and of course that's why I'm demonstrating it here. We're not really looking at what the rest of the units are doing, but if I can get a hold of this unit real quick, and we can see some of their damage value, that's pretty solid, especially compared to some of these other units that are still going to do good damage and get good value. But it's just not going to be anywhere near what an Irondrake can do when it's really in a good position, getting good value. It's going to be able to push multiple waves of enemies back. So using it in siege battles, right? Siege and settlement battles, I think, is where an Irondrake is going to shine. It's going to be able to, find choke points. Anything that has really good choke points. So even some field battles, it's going to be okay in. But being able to find something in a choke point and get some heavy fire on it without worries about yourself being flanked or anything like that, really effective. So you can see we're moving him to the alley. I've fought on this map with this unit before, mostly in the Grombrindle campaign. But you can see one shot on these Skaven Slave Spears, they're routed. And unfortunately, this is so close to the end of the battle, I couldn't get too much good footage of it. But I've had missions where all you really need is maybe a unit here. You want something to protect it. You don't want to send them out alone. But you can, if they keep pouring units down this alleyway, you can just have the Irondrake repel them one after the other after the other. Got a shot, easy shot on that, routed them. So these are some good examples of times and places where this unit is really effective. Now to talk about some of the worst case scenarios, again, experience with the Grombrindle campaign, pretty much the source of why I asked the question of whether you should even bring Irondrakes and what inspired me to make this video. We're showing a little bit of a demonstration battle against the Dark Elves. Don't worry too much about my composition, just kind of threw together a quick little versus AI battle here to get things together. But what we really want to see is later on in this fight when the Irondrakes start to get active, they can do some serious damage, but they become so vulnerable so easily. And you'll notice that I don't even have any cavalry in this fight, so we'll kind of see how the health of the Irondrakes is and their damage value at the end of the fight. Now on this first wave, if you can get them through a little bit of your checkerboard here, they can really get some good value. Again, we can see Irondrakes hitting mass melee infantry. Devastating. Absolutely devastating damage. And we're probably going to be able to set up for another hit on their infantry on the side here. Now I fast forwarded a little bit and already lost half of my health here. Skipped right over the part in fast forward, though I can always show it on this replay anyway. But you can see we lost a few models, but we're down to about a third of our health from 2, maybe 3 volleys from these Dark Shards. And of course, that leads me to my point that I want to make about some of the worst case scenarios. Enemies who have lots of missile units, especially if they have armor-piercing missile units. The Dark Elves, it's absolutely devastating. Like, one unit of Dark Shards annihilates a unit of Irondrakes. And so we can get some value out of this unit still by getting some of these early hits. But you cannot keep it in the fight, and it's at such great risk. And again, Dark Elves tend to bring at least a little bit of cavalry or some monsters, which the standard Irondrake specifically won't do that good against. And you can see I'm having to move this unit around a lot just to keep it safe and potentially get some value. It's at risk from so many different archer units, and I don't have enough archer units of my own in this fight to overpower them. So it's just, like, every time you go to attack with this, you're taking a huge risk, because even though Dark Shards have short range, it's still a lot better than Iron Drakes, and their damage completely ignores that armor that they have. And in general, I'd say they're just not that useful in field battles. You're going to end up spending more time micromanaging them and trying to keep track of what they're doing and where they're going than you're actually going to be able to get value out of them. Again, I say that, and you can see in this fight, they're still getting a lot of good value. They're still getting hits on a lot of things. But by the end of this fight, it's going to be back down to 12 units. So it's going to be at half health. The dwarves don't have a casualty replenishment hero, so we can't get that back up in one turn. And again, just the amount of micromanagement, something I talked about earlier. I don't have any artillery in this army. I don't have any gyrocopters in this army, nothing like that. So I have nothing but time to, I'm slowly moving each of my units up a little bit, and I focus on moving the Iron Drakes, trying to make use of them and keep them alive. But all it really takes is like 2 volleys from a full health Dark Shard, and this thing's already down below half health, putting it at severe risk and basically taking it out of the fight. Again, you look away for too long and it's dead. You let it get cavalry charged, it's dead. You let it take shots on fire at will, it's shooting your own team in the back, and it's going to do a ton of damage. This particular Dwarf Warrior is much weaker because it took a friendly fire shot right in the back from the Iron Drakes. And yeah, you can see if they get into a 1v1 situation with some Dark Shards, I mean, you can try to not let this happen. But like you can see, we're losing this, right? They're getting out a lot of damage value, and they're being helped by some Quarrelers. We're going to end up winning the fight right there. Again, crazy damage value, so perhaps these are still worth it, but the risk factor in field battles and against missile unit heavy enemy armies like High Elves or Dark Elves, very high risk factor. So, for the final evaluation, is it worth bringing? I really do think it depends somewhat on the enemy you're facing and the situation you're in. Again, up against High Elves and Dark Elves, it will still produce very good value. You're still going to get a lot of damage value out of it compared to your other units, but it's going to come at much greater risk to the unit itself and the health of it overall. And again, this is a fight where I had nothing else to worry about for my main units. The only thing I'm micromanaging is the Iron Drake. If I'm not watching it and it takes 1 extra volley from those Dark Shards, it's in absolute dire straits. Alternatively, against Skaven and Greenskins, it can be absolutely dominant. Again, a single Iron Drake coupled with a Thane hero can devastate wave after wave of Skaven or Greenskin infantry in any settlement or siege battle with few to no losses. So where it works well, it works extremely well. It's really a top tier unit in the role it's supposed to serve. However, the downsides as a result are quite severe. It's often target fired by enemy archer units, and because of the low model count, it will die fast, its damage will drop off quickly, and especially against any unit with armor piercing missile damage, is just going to die before you can even look back at it. Plus, the limited range means it can't counteract these units effectively either. So it's capable of great damage. I still think it's worth bringing. We can see even in this field battle, it got its damage worth. But I think that you have to be careful to balance it. I wouldn't bring this and gyrocopters and artillery. I would try to find a happy medium. These are actually going to be very effective in siege battles, so you can kind of keep them back in field battles and try to keep them a little bit safer, take them off fire at will, maybe use them for a little bit of that first infantry push and then pull them back. After sitting here talking about it and going over all this review, I'm going to change my answer from it depends to yes, I think they're worth bringing. I think you have to be careful with them in field battles, but you can see we still got good damage out of them, and bringing them in settlement and siege battles is going to produce really high value, especially if coupled with a hero or a lord. I mean, we could see even in that siege battle I demonstrated, we didn't even need a lord or a hero for them to get absolutely crazy value and quickly turn the tide in our favor. And even if they had had another half army in the city, it would have just been perfect setup for us to demonstrate the power of the Iron Drake. The one caveat I would put is it's a unit that requires micromanagement and attention. You can't bring this and several other units like artillery and gyrocopters. If you're going to choose between, like, you probably have to choose between gyro units and the Irondrakes. But I think that it has a lot of value. It's a very strong unit. It's a unique unit, but once you get the hang of it, it can be really effective, and it can serve you well pretty deep into the game. So with that being said, I think I've covered everything I wanted to for this video. The Irondrake really has the ability to wipe out both cheap chaff infantry and high-tier armored infantry at a very effective rate. It can rout your enemy and give you the advantage to move forward slowly. It's great in siege and settlement battles, where I think the dwarves tend to struggle a little bit more than they do in the field battles with their artillery. So as a result, I think that you should bring them. I think that they would make a good complement to your artillery, and you'll be able to use them effectively in siege battles. I do think you should potentially avoid using them against the Dark Elves, even in siege battles, but against the Skaven and Greenskins, you definitely want to bring them. I hope that you've all found this video valuable and interesting. I thought it might be more neat to do a more focused video type on some of the more unique units in the game. And of course, like I said, I've found myself asking the question of, is this particular unit worth it a lot lately? And so I wanted to make this video to answer the question for myself as well. So hopefully I've answered that question for you, or at least put you on the right path to deciding for yourself. If you did enjoy the video, remember to like and subscribe. And if you think I missed any important features of this unit, or you have additional questions about them, leave a comment in the comment section down below. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.